This is CNN.
Why are some people living longer when so many others are being killed off at a young age? The politicos call it opposition research. OPPO for short, are the people who practice it engaging in dirty politics. And a Polish hero is heading home 50 years after his death. The question is, would he really have wanted to go?
From CNN, this is The World Today with Catherine Crier at the CNN Center.
Thanks for joining us. Frank Sesno is off today. We begin with the two-day-old U.S. railroad shutdown and the efforts to end it. As we speak, Congress is pushing ahead with legislation that would get the trains rolling again. CNN's Bob Franken joins us from Capitol Hill with the latest. Bob?
As you said, Catherine, as we speak, the House Energy and Commerce Full Committee has begun final preparations on the bill that at some point this evening will be sent to the full House floor. There is high optimism that the legislation is going to pass in the House. There is somewhat less optimism, but still optimism that it will also make it through the Senate. There is now some hope that this will get to the President's desk before midnight. Very briefly, we're talking about House Joint Resolution 515. It was worked out over about a 24-hour period. No sleep last night for many of the members and their staff people. Very briefly, what it does, it provides for a cooling-off period that ends up being 38 days during which there must be negotiations and mandatory arbitration if the two sides are not able to agree. The only hook is that after the final result of all this, the President can reject the final conclusion.
Bob, catchphrases, but does Congress see this as a lockout or a strike?
Just about everybody believes that this is mainly a lockout, meaning that management shut down most of the nation's rail system. As a matter of fact, the unions are really adamantly opposed to this binding arbitration. First of all, they always oppose binding arbitration, but in this particular case, the unions feel that management did such a bad job of public relations by having this lockout, shutting down the nationwide rail system, that the unions feel they now have the advantage. Nevertheless, it looks likely that the unions will not be able to block this.
And what are some of the big problems? What are the big issues that labor and management are negotiating over?
Well, as a matter of fact, this is an unusual culture of the railroad industry. Of course, there's wages and benefits, but they have work rule problems. That's always the big issue, work rules. One, for instance, has to do with the mechanical ways employees. Those are the people who repair the tracks. Right now, they are restricted to working no further than 250 miles away from their homes. Management would like to take them as far away as 1,000 miles. The union people say that's impossible. Their family lives would be ruined.
Well, Bob, we'll certainly be watching for progress through the evening. Bob Franken on Capitol Hill. Thanks very much. A prolonged railroad shutdown could cause some big political problems for President Bush. With more on that, senior White House correspondent Charles Bierbauer.
President Bush, with no direct power to stop the strike, has to rely on Congress.
And we now face a complete halt of passenger and commuter rail lines. And I urge the House and Senate to act to end this strike today. The national interest requires no less. And there must be no further delay.
The president is ready to sign on to Congressman John Dingell's plan for getting the trains back on track. Mr. Bush this week has insisted this is not a political matter.
Everything is a political issue in an election year. I mean, the White House, the first question is, did it use all of its real resources to bring about a settlement?
The rail strike may be more about business than politics, but the president clearly knows the one area where he can lose ground politically.
This places an enormous inconvenience to the American worker on the commuter side, and then as it begins to take a hold on moving freight and moving product, agricultural product, for example, to market, it's terrible.
Shipments are reportedly already backing up in ports and warehouses. The U.S. economy has been slowly improving, though not enough to make Bush comfortable. And the economic signals are mixed. The Commerce Department Thursday revised the gross domestic product for the first quarter upward to 2.7%, the strongest since Bush took office. But unemployment claims for the second week in June rose unexpectedly, a rise attributed in part to the Los Angeles riots. And sales of existing homes dropped in May for the second straight month. Home sales are very sensitive to interest rates, which the Bush administration thinks could be still lower.
Even if the economy were growing very robustly, you'd have some statistics or some sectors that were not doing as well. Clearly, the economy is in a period of modest growth.
And candidate Bush hopes it can sustain it. Republican officials acknowledge the rail strike has caused concern, both for its impact on the economy and potential political fallout. One Republican source says there's a measure of relief that Congress is acting and that the partisan politics has been minimal. Charles Bierbauer, CNN, the White House.
And to Los Angeles, where the city council members may offer a record-breaking settlement to taped beating victim Rodney King. Published reports say the council considered offering King up to $8 million to settle the lawsuit against the city. King's attorney, however, is demanding $83 million. The largest settlement for alleged LAPD brutality is $5.5 million, paid to a paralyzed shooting victim in 1991. The Space Shuttle Columbia is orbiting the Earth. The shuttle is scheduled to stay in space for 13 days, the longest shuttle flight yet. The shuttle roared off on a column of flame shortly after noon today. The 7 astronauts aboard Columbia are part of a study on the effects of expanded space travel on humans. NASA eventually wants to leave astronauts in orbit for months to man space stations. Americans are living longer if they can survive their youth.
Highest level ever. The violence and other injuries that destroy our youth in their prime are painful to note, and they are impossible to ignore.
At the half hour, the nation's annual checkup on its health, and in just a few minutes, digging for political dirt. An in-depth look at the age-old art of political investigating.
The World Today is brought to you by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately?
When redesigning the Ford Taurus wagon, we gave it the kind of shape that holds your attention, available anti-lock brakes that hold on slick roads, and a newly restyled instrument panel that holds more than convenient controls. Available dual airbags, a Ford Motor Company exclusive in this class, because we know Ford Taurus wagon will also be holding you.
Have you driven a Ford lately?
On Norwegian Cruise Line, you're in for more incredible days, unbelievable nights, and unforgettable places than you ever dreamed possible. And now we're the official cruise line of Universal Studios Hollywood and Universal Studios Florida, where you meet the stars and ride the movies. Feel the heat of Backdraft live in Hollywood and go back to the future in Florida. So set sail on Norwegian Cruise Line, then take off for places like nowhere else on Earth.